We won't wait.
We won't be paralyzed by what we see.
We won't run. We'll conjure up the courage we need to create solutions for our homeland.
Our
Africa.
We are #DIY Africa.
Welcome to #DIY Africa, presented by the Civic Tech Innovation Forum and Jamfest.
Let me bring you back in, Kavisha. So everybody on the panel so far has alluded to the fact that there are some gray areas, some of them completely surrounded with red tape in terms of how people can access information. To what extent does that affect innovation in the development of tools? When you know beforehand that there will be areas that will either be difficult to go or difficult to or impossible to reach, does that play at the back of developers' mind and affect the design of the tools that you think about or innovate?
Definitely, Jimmy. I think it's perhaps one of the biggest barriers that developers have when they are creating tools for transparency or accountability. So just to give you a bit of a background, at Corruption Watch this year, we launched something called the VESA tool. And VESA is a colloquial word to reveal or to expose. And basically, our tool gives the public access to information about all 1,150 police stations across the country. So its vehicles, its budgets, its posts, and so on. But you can also then report corruption on this tool. But the main thing of one of the main reasons for why we wanted to develop this was because we found that the public didn't actually have the necessary information about how their police stations work and function. And that led to a huge imbalance of power. So we have a policing crisis in South Africa. It's viewed as one of the most corrupt institutions in the country. And in developing this tool, we thought, well, if we create more transparency in the policing sector, there could perhaps be accountability. Communities can start advocating for better policing. But the huge thing in the development of this tool, Jimmy, was that we were relying on the South African Police Service to provide us with information about their police stations. And as Samuel was indicating in his response to you, the nature of the data that we're getting is quite insufficient. You know, it's very difficult to work with it, and it differs across provinces. So essentially, we went to the main, South African Police Service head office, and we requested all of this information through PIA requests, as Sharice was alluding to earlier. And they take a very long time to respond to you. They note that, well, it's COVID, people aren't in the office, so there's all of those challenges. But then the data comes to you in different formats, and it's not standardized, which then leads to a number of discrepancies and gaps. So now you can no longer actually compare, sort of stats that are coming out of the Western Cape with stats that are coming out of KwaZulu-Natal, because the nature of the information that they provided to you was so different. So I think many of the people on the call would be familiar with something called the Open Contracting Data Standard. And that was something that was introduced to ensure that information in relation to tenders and procurement are all standardized, so that there's 5 different types of information. And I think what needs to happen if we want to improve information is that government has to introduce a standardizing process across the board. I mean, of course, different departments would be different, the contexts are different, but there has to be a standardizing process where data is collected and stored in the same way, so that when we are requesting that information, it then becomes easier to put it out there, and then we're not drawing assumptions from it. I think what we've learned, especially now during COVID, is that there's so much of data out there, and people then start to interpret data to suit their own biases. And that also becomes another real problematic area. If you're not putting information out in a standardized format, if the information is not clear, then you start seeing that people will draw on the information to suit their particular narrative. And all of that, becomes a huge challenge in terms of the tools that we're developing, because you want to be able to give access, you want to be able to give the public information that is accessible and digestible, but you also don't want to be, fueling disinformation or misinformation campaigns if that data can be manipulated or used for other purposes.
We'll do it ourselves. We are #DIY Africa.